Thank you, everyone, for joining me for these live internet studies one more time. My name is Ariel ben-Lyman, HaNaviy. The live internet studies are an hour and a half long. In case you're only watching this video, this first, say, 20-minute video on the topic of rapture and things like that, the entire study is an hour and a half long, but it's broken up into two segments. The first segment is the hour-long study, Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events. We're talking about things like rapture, Book of Revelation, things like that. We're working our way towards the Book of Revelation. We're actually in topic 11 out of, I think, like 18 topics or something like that. I'll show you, I'll flash the topical index on the screen later on, but or in post-production, but I'm not going to show it to you right now. The second topic is entitled A Trinitarian Response to Biblical Unitarianism. It's kind of in a continuation of my exploring the Shema discussions on the issues of Trinity, where it's an apologetic section dealing with issues related to a kind of a mock debate between a Trinitarian and a biblical Unitarian. So if you're interested in both topics, stick around for the entire show, okay? Let's jump right into the first topic. Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events. Eschatology, the word itself, suggests the end times, the eschaton, those events which take place later on. What you can see on your screen right now is a slide that captures four of the main rapture views that are predominant in Christian circles, reading from top to bottom and from left to right, upper left corner, pre-tribulation rapture. These views are in response to the question asked at the top of this slide. It says, when will God rapture the church? What are the four different views? First view, pre-tribulation rapture. The name says it all. This, by the way, assumes a 7-year time period at the very end of God dealing with mankind, dealing with evil, bringing in his kingdom. When I say dealing with evil, we're talking about dealing with the Antichrist and the false prophet who are going to be on the scene someday. The Pretrib rapture answers this question, when will God rapture the church, this way, according to this slide. Pre-tribulation rapturists believe the church will be raptured before this final 7-year period known as Daniel's 70th week. Now, this slide calls this time frame Daniel's 70th week, but I think that's probably one of the better ways to describe it. This slide was put together by Zion's Hope, which is a Prewrath outfit like myself. So they don't call this time period the 70th, they don't call it the 7-year tribulation. If this were your standard pre-trib belief system, if this whole slide was put together by the Pretribbers themselves, they wouldn't call it the Daniel 70th week. They would probably call it the 7-year tribulation, as do many of the other rapture views. Everyone except Prewrath Rapture, I believe. Even the Posttribbers call it the 7-year tribulation for the most part. So, pre-trib rapture, rapture is at the very beginning of the 7 years. Upper right corner, mid-trib rapture. Mid-tribulation rapturists believe the rapture will occur halfway through the 7-year period, just before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. And you can tell by looking at the two slides comparatively, left and right, the two top ones, they're basically the same theology, just the mid-trib is shrunk down in terms of the size of God's wrath, but everything else is more or less the same. Meaning the impact of the rapture removes God's people from planet Earth before any significant tribulation. Lower left corner, post-tribulation rapture. Post-tribulation rapturists believe that the rapture will occur following the 7-year period known as Daniel's 70th week. Again, they would probably call it the 7-year tribulation, owing to the fact that if you look at the slide, God's wrath / tribulation is running the entire 7 years. And it's in their name. This is why I'm saying this. In the name, it says post-trib. They mean after the 7-year tribulation. There's some equivocation of the word tribulation from my perspective, only because I don't view the entire 7 years as tribulation. But if in your normal, everyday, garden variety conversation that you have with your average Christian, if you ask them how long is the tribulation period, they're probably going to tell you it's 7 years long. So the name post-trib means post-7-year tribulation, just like pre-tribulation rapture means pre-7-year tribulation rapture, and mid-tribulation means middle of the 7-year tribulation. So you can hear it in their name. Thus, when we get to this final lower right corner, the one known as pre-wrath rapture, one of the first things that the pre-wrath rapturists do is they remove the equivocated word tribulation out of the equation. And there's no such pre or mid or post tribulation label in their name at all. It's named pre-wrath. So what happens to the 7-year tribulation? It's no longer called the 7-year tribulation by design. It's simply called the 7-year time period, or Daniel's 70th week, which is closer to the biblical designation that we feel is accurate to this time frame. That's not to say that we don't think that the 7 years will be a tribulational time period, meaning it won't be full of troublesome events. We do believe it will include troublesome events, but the reason we're not giving it the label 7-year tribulation has more to do with dispensationalism than it does with denying that there will be tribulation. So what's the position in pre-wrath? The little description reads, Prewrath Rapturists believe the rapture will occur following the opening of the 6th seal of the book of Revelation, which the 6th seal itself happens sometime after the midpoint, but before the very end of the 7-year time frame. So it's important to locate the sequencing of the 6th seal as occurring in sometime between the midpoint and the very end. The church, it goes on to say, will experience severe persecution by the Antichrist, right, what we call the Great Tribulation, but will be snatched away before God begins to pour out his wrath during the day of the Lord. So if you just look at all 4 of the views, you'll notice that the first 3 have this first half of the 70th week labeled as tribulation. But when you get to the pre-wrath rapture in the lower right corner, they don't use that label. We don't use that label tribulation. Again, it's by design. It's to avoid the equivocation on a term that's not biblical. And yet, at the same time, it's a popular term, so I'm not going to be too harsh on people using that term. Not every term is biblical. The word Great Tribulation is biblical. The word tribulation itself is biblical, but there's some debate on when the timing is. However, we're going to find out tonight, I'm going to talk about just briefly, even the phrase second coming, which is on all 4 charts, right? At the far right of every chart, there's a little arrow, black arrow pointing down that says second coming. For the most part, it says second coming. Except for the pre-wrath rapture, then the arrow gets kind of wonky. But basically, second coming appears at the far right of every chart. Well, guess what? The word second coming isn't even in the Bible. I hear a lot of people always arguing, well, rapture isn't in the Bible. The word rapture isn't in the Bible. And actually, the word second coming isn't even in the Bible either. And yet we know that there's going to be what we label a second coming. It just doesn't show up that way in English. We've got other words that describe the event that we would describe as second coming, a number of different terms. But the exact English phrase, second coming, doesn't even show up in the Bible itself, at least not in any translation that I've checked, and I'm just using the ones that are available to me online. It's not like I'm going to go out and buy hundreds of different versions just so I can see if they use the phrase second coming. So what's my point? The effort to disambiguate terminology oftentimes doesn't start with the Bible. It actually starts really with the words that we humans use. Then we go back to the Bible and see if the Bible is even using that term. If the Bible isn't using that term, then we just make ourselves aware. And then when we talk about and use the term, we let the people know, hey, there's a biblical term that's used to refer to the English term that we feel is a bit ambiguous. All right, those are the 4 views. Let's jump right in to the study. The study tonight is humorously named Posttrib Prewrath Rapture Smackdown Part 1. Part 1, you're like, what? Yeah, there's actually going to be 2 parts to this. The second part, I don't know if I'll get through all of this one tonight. I think I can get through it. It's not very long, really, in my opinion. But in part 1, we're going to actually begin looking at making the case for the Prewrath view, which really we're in topic number 11, if you remember from the topical index. Didn't show up in the live class, it showed up in post-production. Topic 11 is going to end with the Posttrib Prewrath Rapture Smackdown Part 2. So basically, in Part 1, I'm going to interact with a very well-known Posttribber who's actually debating a Pretribber. And I simply pulled the notes of the Posttribber and created this Word document that you're looking at right now, where I took the statements from the Posttribber, and then I, a Prewrather, who wasn't invited to the debate at the time that it took place. It is available on YouTube, by the way. And I'll tell you in a moment who the debaters are. You'll know them. At least you should know one of them. I don't know if you'll know the other one. But I took the notes from the Posttribber, which was his opening remarks, where he is describing why he doesn't believe in a pre-trib rapture. And the purpose of this study tonight, that's why it's a little bit humorous, why I call it Smackdown, is to show that at the end of the day, Posttribbers and Prewrathers have so much in common with one another that it's almost negligible, or the differences are almost negligible. It's almost like we truly are saying the same things, but perhaps we don't even know it. We're probably not aware of it most of the time. And so I say this for a very good reason. When I listen to and read and watch resources on Posttrib, often it is a reaction against the Pretrib that I'm listening to. It's kind of a rejection of Pretribs, more so than it is an embracing of Posttrib. It's like, I've read my Bible and I don't believe there's a Pretrib rapture, so they think that the only viable option out there is Posttrib, and they just run headlong into the arms of the Posttrib, and then they feel good. But in reality, the pre-wrath view that I hold to is actually so well developed by now. It originated in the 90s with Marv Rosenthal, one of the fathers of the pre-wrath. And then shortly after that, the book that by Van Kampen came out, like within 5 years later, like 93, 95, somewhere around there. And what has happened since then is it created a firestorm, a phenomenon that is sweeping through a lot of Christianity, where people are realizing, wow, yes, pre-trib is very indefensible, but post-trib isn't the only viable option out there. Pre-wrath has some solid legs to stand on. And for good reason. It's because it seeks to synthesize all the strengths of the other 3 positions while discarding the weaknesses of those same 3 positions. And yet, many post-tribbers, current post-tribbers of today, simply aren't aware that pre-wrath is a viable option. And so instead of going from pre-trib to pre-wrath, they go from pre-trib to post-trib. But what I want to show you is that there's no really good reason why they should be rejecting pre-wrath either, given so many of the similarities that I'm going to demonstrate tonight. So that's why I gave it a little bit of a humorous spin. Prewrath Rapture, Posttrib Prewrath Rapture Smackdown, right? Hint, whoever wins, Pretrib loses. Ha ha ha, right? You see my little LOL there. This reminded me of the, when I stole this kind of label, whoever wins, Pretrib loses, from the, a while back, there was a Alien versus Predator movie that came out in the Alien franchise, or the Predator franchise. I can't remember which one either. I guess it doesn't matter. It's both, right? But we know the popular scary monster, the aliens, and we know the popular scary monster, the Predator. I say monster there, but they're both aliens, right? They're both extraterrestrial in that sense. And there was a poster campaign advertisement that showed Alien versus Predator, and then below it, it said, whoever wins, ... we lose. And I thought that's interesting because in the movie franchises, both the Alien character and the Predator character hunt humans. So it really doesn't matter who battles between the two of them. Whichever one of them is the winner, we, the humans, are still the losers. So I thought, okay, this is kind of the same concept. Post-trib, pre-wrath. Whoever wins, pre-trib loses. Okay. Again, this is all a friendly in-house debate. I really don't have anything personal against pre-tribbers or post-tribbers. I hope you guys all understand the lighthearted nature of which I'm having these particular debates and things like that. All right, you guys ready? Let's work down through this. Now, at this point in time, I want to indicate that in the YouTube video that you're watching, there should be a link to the YouTube video that I pulled these just transcript of the debater from. And the debaters are, for the pre-trib, it's Pastor Walker, but I can't remember his first name. It might be David Walker. I apologize for not remembering off the top of my head, but his last name is Walker. He's a well-known enough pre-tribber that he decided to do a public debate with, you ready for it? Dr. Michael Brown. Yeah, he's the post-tribber that I'm going to be interacting with tonight. I'm not really interacting with him. Obviously, I didn't get permission from Dr. Brown, but I don't think I need, because I'm not debating him. I'm responding to him. So he is the post-tribber that we're going to be reading. Dr. Michael Brown is very well known for being one of the world's foremost Messianic Jewish apologists, and some time ago, he decided to do a debate with Pastor Walker on why Dr. Brown doesn't hold to a pre-trib. Dr. Brown also did a video and a book with Professor Craig Keener, who's also a post-tribber. And Brown and Keener did a video, I believe, on something to the effect of why we don't believe in a pre-trib rapture. I think the name of their book is Not Afraid of the Antichrist, Not Afraid to Face the Antichrist, or something like that. I'll flash a screen grab in post-production that shows the book and things like that. But that's who my post-tribber is in these little notes. And so what I decided to do is I took these, again, this is public video. I mean, it's available for anyone on YouTube land. Just Google search it, Brown versus Walker, post-trib versus pre-trib, or something like that. And then you should be able to find it. It's a very informative video. I recommend you watch it. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to read down through them. I've numbered them so it's easier for us to kind of keep track of where we're going. If we get through all of this tonight, great. If we don't get through all of it, I'm fine with that as well. You guys ready? Here we go. Point number 1. There's no particular order in the numbering. This is just the way that Dr. Brown spoke, and when I transcribed it, I decided to break it down into like little statements or paragraphs that I could interact with. That's the only reason the numbers exist. Other than that, it's really just Dr. Brown talking during his opening statement about why he doesn't believe in a pre-trib rapture. And one of the main topics that's being asked, because debates usually have like one central question that they go after rather than this broad overview of why you don't believe what you believe. They usually tackle one main question. And one of the main questions, if I caught it correctly, in this particular debate is why Dr. Brown says that he doesn't believe that the let me see, let me find it here. I think it's one of the okay, it's point number 3. There's no support for a secret pre-trib rapture separate from the actual second coming. And so let me do this real quick. I want to show you these slides. If you look at the pre-tribulation rapture, you'll notice that the rapture is on the far left of your screen, and the second coming is on the far right. You also have to remember that in the pre-trib model, they're working from the dispensational hermeneutic, which means they believe that the church and Israel are two separate dispensations. So they hold to your classic pre-tribber is also a classic dispensationalist, or at least holds to some form of dispensationalism that teaches that the church in Israel exists in two separate dispensations and God does not overlap them. And so the rapture of the church must take place outside of the 7-year tribulation, so-called 7-year tribulation, because the rapture of the church belongs to a different dispensation. And thus the 70th week of Daniel that we recognize is the same time period as the 7-year tribulation. They're the same time period, just different labels, different groups. This time frame is given over to Israel. According to the dispensationalists, the 7-year tribulation doesn't belong to the church. Therefore, she can't exist inside of it. We can't have a rapture happening inside of the 70th week at all, anywhere, which means the mid-tribbers, in this next slide, begin to pull away from the dispensational theology of allowing the church to be located inside or exist inside of a time frame that's given over to Israel. Thus, in their name, mid-trib rapture, they are at least admitting that the church is in the middle of some time frame that should belong to Israel. But going back to the pre-trib rapture, they put the second coming at the far right because that's where the church comes back to earth after the 7 years is finished. So their rapture and their second coming are both, as far as I can tell, outside of the 7-year period. They exist in different dispensations. So this is part of what Dr. Brown is going to be answering he's going to be trying to refute. I don't believe in a second coming followed by later by a third coming, right? First coming would have been 2,000 years ago. Second coming would be before the 7-year tribulation. Third coming would be what we popularly call the second coming itself. Dr. Brown's kind of trying to combat that, and we can see that in some of his answers. There's not a stitch of scriptural support for a secret pre-trib rapture separate from the actual second coming. So the debate is not over whether there is a rapture or not. Both Brown and Walker believe in the event known as the rapture, the snatching away known as the rapture. That wasn't the debate question, nor is the question exactly the timing of the rapture. Is it pre-trib? Is it post-trib? That wasn't the main focus. The main focus of the notes that I pulled was simply, is there a secret second coming followed by a third coming? In other words, are they separated by 7 years? Is it secret? Things like that. So Dr. Brown's going to keep interacting with the fact that the rapture is not secret. It's quite noisy. It's not invisible. It's visible, and it's not separated by 7 years. Something like that. In other words, in case you didn't know, I mean, you should know by now because I've been teaching you for so long. But let me just show you the slide. Sorry, go backwards one. In the post-tribulation rapture, where is the rapture? On the 7-year time frame, according to classic post-tribbers, which this chart is a classic post-trib chart, classic post-tribbers put the rapture at the end of the 70th week, at the end of the 7 years. Where do they put the second coming? Immediately after it or at the same time. In other words, as far as I've heard them articulate their position, the rapture and the second coming are one and the same event. So, going back to our Smackdown slide, it's not really a slide. It's a Word document that I converted to HTML so I can read it on the internet. So I can read it in my browser. All right, let's read down through this. Like I said, I don't think it should take the entire class, but there's only, let's see, of the points, I think there's only like 25, something like that. But some of my answers are a bit lengthy. All right, here we go.